Hi, I'm MG Siegler here with TechCrunch TV, and today I have Vibhu Norby with me. Vibhu, thanks for joining me. You're one of the co-founders of Origami Labs. You guys have, previously you created a product called EveryMe, and now you're kind of working on your new products. But the reason we have you here today is you kind of wrote an interesting post in that it was a rebuttal to a lot of the kind of the common thinking going around now that everything you do needs to be mobile and mobile first in the way that you approach app development, meaning that everything should be a native application on the mobile devices, whether it's iPhones or Android devices or Microsoft or any of those other ones that no one uses. And you're kind of going against the grain on that. I mean, it's honestly been a lot of investors who have written that, I guess, rather than like me, Fred Wilson, yeah. Some other people, and so you're going at it from the other perspective. So the two main things, I think, you wrote a very interesting post, and the two things that you kind of broke it up into were first the idea of charging, right? And that's not the part we're going to focus on, but the second thing is the idea that for really closing these viral loops and doing things to get your app out there, you need to have a web presence first and foremost rather than a mobile presence. So kind of go into your thoughts a little bit there on that.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I wrote the post kind of to express my thoughts about how our company had kind of come to the realization that mobile might not be the best place to start a new business. So, when Oliver, my co-founder, and I had started EveryMe, we had a lot of experience kind of deploying apps onto the App Store and finding a lot of success in the early days.
Right.
So we had taken a lot of our experience from the early days of the App Store and kind of used it to create this mobile-first social network. And, our struggles on the mobile platform, I came to understand as being problems that were not just unique to us alone, but maybe applied to a lot of other people that are in our space.
So what was different about the initial ones that you guys built, which I should disclose, of course, that I did not know you guys at the time when you were initially building the apps, but we at Crunch Fund, which I'm a general partner in, we did invest in EveryMe, which is now Origami Labs.
That's
but
right.
Thank you. I think that you're welcome. I think that this is interesting because we do have differing opinions on this. So what was the difference between those early applications and the later one? Was it just the maturity of the App Store, not that many apps out there?
Yeah. So I mean, I think it was like a basic economic problem. Like there was a lot more demand than supply at the time. Yeah. And at this point, like there's a lot more supply than demand. So I think it's kind of swung the other way. And there are so many companies these days, and you've invested in a lot of them. And I know I have friends and colleagues that have worked on a lot of them. And they're basically their strategy is all the engagement is happening on mobile, and the mobile growth is phenomenal. So obviously, like let's not focus on the web at all. Let's put all of our eggs into the mobile basket and kind of acquire users solely through that platform.
Which is what you guys, of course, tried to do with EveryMe when it came out. You had a website that would direct people to download the app,
and we still do.
And you still do.
Yeah, and our new strategy is kind of user acquisition on the web and kind of demonstrating value to the user on the web first, and expecting them to, after they've kind of become acquainted with our products on the web, to transition into a mobile user.
And one thing you talk about a lot is the onboarding issue. Like that's kind of the biggest one, where you rattled off some numbers. You would see huge amount of downloads, but a very small percentage would actually convert. And like one of the things that you hear over and over again, and you brought up, is the fact that a lot of people don't even open the app after they download it.
That's right.
What is going on there? Why are people not doing that?
Well, I think that, like, in particular, the mobile, because of the way that Apple is kind of, and Google, but mainly Apple has set up like their App Store. It's you have a lot of window shoppers, like people that just got their phone and they open up the store for the first time and they download the top 25 apps, or they go to the feature section and download them. Yep. But they don't have any reason to use your app in the first place. So they're not genuine users. They're just people just trying to see what's there.
But so what, like, well, yeah, and I mean, it's kind of impossible to know, like, why they would even download it to begin with, just on the off chance that they have a second to kill or something.
That's the problem, though, right? Because, like, we don't know why people are coming into our app.
Yeah.
And we can't, so therefore we can't optimize for, like, any particular user experience. We have to put a guess out there and then, kind of track the usage over a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and then figure out, like, from like that data. But we can't do it, we can't react very quickly.
Yeah, but I mean, couldn't you say that you don't really want those users anyway? People who would download it and just
I
aren't
agree.
really that
I
interested
totally
in
agree.
doing
I don't
it?
want those users. But it kind of like, as a founder like of a company, like we're always trying to optimize different metrics for success.
Right.
And I feel like when you're on the, especially because like a lot of like, if you want to get a TechCrunch article written about your company or some other kind of like traction amongst investors, you know, what they're asking for is like downloads and users, which is kind of like similar to how I think like the web was back in the 1990s.
Right.
And so you start optimizing for that count, and I think that's a mistake. It's hard to avoid because you actually do get download. Like Apple, the iOS store actually does provide like a lot of like kind of natural like people coming into your app because
Sure.
of like featuring and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
It's just the wrong metric to track.
What is the right metric?
I think there's really two metrics. One is revenue, and one is like active users, people that use your product every day.
Right. Why is it? I mean, one of the best points I think that you made was the fact that the way that the mobile apps are set up right now, it's not that easy to iterate because you just can't, unlike the web where you can just push something live immediately, you need to go through the app approval process. You know, it's a little bit easier, of course, with Google than it is with Apple. But is that really, you know, talking about all these data points, is that kind of what you're getting at? Would it be better if there was no kind of gatekeeper scenario where then you could quickly iterate and see what was working and what wasn't?
Yeah, exactly. So that's exactly how it would fix the problem. Like if you could, for example, open up Safari on your browser and go to origami.com, which is our URL, and immediately be kind of loaded into a native app experience, and our app could link to other apps that didn't require downloads.
Right.
That would be phenomenal because then we could track the user, why they came to our site, but also we didn't have that friction of like the App Store, search our app name, you know, scroll left and find our app, install it, put your password in, and open the app. Like all those steps are gone in that scenario, and that's why the web is so great, right? Like it's kind of let any company be the platform.
You know, one thing you didn't really hit upon in your post was the idea of web apps specifically for mobile. Like, is that something that you view as a potential remedy for this problem? You know, something that you just load within the browser, within Safari or Chrome itself, and run just as a quasi as an actual web app, but within the web browser, rather than doing a full native app experience.
I mean, that's an ideal situation, I guess, but like you don't have access to all the native functionality of the phone through the browser right now, so that a lot of changes would have to happen. I also think that Apple is kind of training us to go to the App Store to download. I mean, actually, everyone is training us to download apps from the store itself. Like if you look at like your personal like blog, Google Analytics, you'll see like not a whole lot of people using the actual Safari to like read your articles versus like I don't know, through like Tweetbot or other types of apps.
Right. I mean, yeah, and so is that. That's kind of what this reminds me of a little bit, and why I sort of agree but sort of disagree. I agree that right now, maybe right this second, that it's a good idea to kind of get your name out there on the web and then push forward with a mobile strategy and absolutely have a mobile strategy. But it feels a little bit like kind of almost the web before there was Twitter and Facebook and all these things, which were just driving links like crazy to one another, right? Don't you think that it has to evolve to a point in the mobile native app space where there's better communications between apps and that they have ways to quickly link into one another and make it so that downloading or whatever it has to be is a pretty seamless experience?
So you're saying that that's possible today, or
no? It's not really right now. I mean, I think that there's little things, you know, like I think in iOS 6 they have those new cards that come down, right? That allow you, if you're on a website, to quickly download the app if they have an app experience. I know that that's like a really low end thing, but you know, and ways to call to other apps within apps. You know, there's ways to kind of hack that together. There have been ways to do that for a while. You know, a lot of people using photo apps and then passing off photos to Instagram, even though they're not technically linked together. They can make a call to it. Is that the way that you think that gets fixed, or do you actually think that it's always going to be kind of the web spurring on this mobile usage?
That's an interesting question. It kind of depends, because I think it also depends whether you're talking about like U.S. versus global. Like I think globally, people are using their phones like in lieu of a computer. I think in the U.S., like we use our computers like during the day, like especially in a lot of different industries, and then we use our phones at night. So I think like, for example, there is like a way to share. You can like technically you can share like a photo from Camera Plus, which is what you're talking about, to like Instagram or Twitter app.
Right.
But that already depends. Like that's kind of a that loop is like you already have both of those apps on your phone, so it's not really a great way for like a new company to acquire users. Like if you're Camera Plus and like we have an origami, like share your photo from Camera Plus to origami, that loop now is broken. Like now they have to go through that whole complicated process. So I just don't think like that's a solution for acquisition of users without like fundamental changes.
Yeah. I think that's obviously up to Apple and Google on their end to be able to, create, whether it's a landing page or something like that, if they don't have that application.
Just
right now it dumps
them
into the App Store. Right?
I don't see any reason why not to. Why if we wanted that functionality, and Camera Plus thought it was like a good idea for us to integrate with them.
Yeah.
They put a link in there that says share photo to origami. They click it and they're in our app.
Yeah.
Like data is fast enough like today, and like we have enough bandwidth to like consume like a couple megabyte app like instantaneously.
So are you talking about kind of downloading in the background without the user even knowing it?
Yeah, like the way the website works. Like when you load up a website these days, like you're loading up tons of like files. Like the total size of a website is like approaching like.
I mean that's a pretty interesting thought. I think that Apple would never go for that, at least anytime soon. I think Google might be open to something like that. I actually think that they should probably explore something like that, because if you think of an app as little more than a website, that's a compelling idea. Apple won't do it because of security reasons, and they don't want people.
That's what they say, yeah.
Right, that's what they'll say, and they don't want people all of a sudden having apps on their phone that they didn't know. You're going to have spammy people, of course, who are deep linking these things.
But we have that on the web, right? Like it's not like this is a problem on the web that we haven't solved.
Yeah, I know, and then that brings up problems like other types of malware and stuff. I guess I could see it working if Apple was still kind of in the gatekeeper mentality where they were still in charge of what apps could or could not be in the App Store, and then you just kind of don't worry about which apps are downloading in the background, because they're all to some extent safe or not safe. I guess you would have to get into kind of the gray line of like, is an app kind of NC-17 or whatever? Does it have mature content versus that? And I think those are all settings I guess you could set. Like you could have automatic usage of apps for 16 below or whatever.
Yeah. So, but what I want to say is like I think that would be fantastic, but like they're not going to do that for a lot of reasons. Like I think Google in particular, and Apple as well, like they're terrified of like what happens when like their platform is like kind of open to everyone else, because they saw what happened with like Microsoft. Like obviously Microsoft took over the operating system world, but the web was a platform that was built on top of the operating system that they couldn't control, and so they lost out to like Google and all these other companies that were able to build upon it. I think they're scared of someone being able to kind of circumvent.
But isn't that stuff? That's sort of Google's mentality, right? They want everyone to be able to, if it's not on the web, they still run Chrome OS. They have an idea for what they want to do for web apps and kind of a unified web system.
But they can't control the web because they don't own the infrastructure. They don't own the operating system of the web. They don't it's decentralized, which is the great part about the internet in general. But like the app system has become a lot more, I guess, centralized. And like for what it's worth, like I think Google's probably not making as much money from mobile as they want to.
Right.
So they're kind of like scared of hemorrhaging all of their revenue from like web search ads to like mobile search ads. And I think that I think in the end, like if you're building an app on these platforms, you're basically pretty much like a product in like a supermarket, where like you'll find your niche, but the retailer itself is going to take all the margins. And everything, all the apps become commoditized because, does that make sense? Like, kind of the way like grocery stores, like all the products are commoditized. Like, there's no margin for the real people creating the products.
It does. I would give two kind of related counter arguments to that. Sure. One would be just kind of what you brought up before, where it's like people around the world, not in the United States. Don't even have, a lot of them don't have computers, and they're just using mobile first experience. And I think the same is true with younger generations who grow up and will either grow up with an iPad only and then switch to a mobile device, and they just wouldn't have it. I mean, that would be my main argument against why I think that you're wrong going forward, and that these things are absolutely the way. Kind of, you're making the argument that both Apple and Google are going about it the wrong way, but it's still they're the gatekeepers right now, right? I mean, until either HTML5 or something else comes along that is able to fully open the ecosystem, I think that you just obviously have to play by these rules, because we're talking about billions and billions of users now versus, the PC shipment numbers are falling all the time.
Yeah, they're not that bad though. Like
they're not that bad.
There's still 400 million computers sold a year.
And how many mobile devices?
1.3 billion. But
But
like people switch out their mobile phones like once every like 1.75 years, and people buy new computers every 4 years. So like there's still, not everyone in the world has a computer, so there's still like a market. But like I understand what you're saying. Like definitely mobile is growing faster.
Right. Eventually, I mean, you can foresee a future in the not too distant future where there's 3 billion mobile phones, and then all of a sudden there's 5 billion mobile phones, and then you have almost the entire planet with some sort of mobile device. Some of those will be smartphones, of course, or some of those will be feature phones at first, and then eventually they'll become smartphones, whether they're running Android tailored versions.
I agree with that. I totally agree with that. But I think that future is
still
still
that
like,
who you have to go after? You're running a startup now. You want to go after 5 billion users, not worry about kind of the aging population, or do you? Because because those are the more monetizable users.
I want to go after after our target market, whatever that is. And like I don't necessarily think our target market is like someone who just has a phone right now, because I don't think they're like monetizable users, like you said. Like I think someone that has like early adopters. I think pretty much every early adopter for a product has a computer.
Yep.
So that's a nexus, like someone that has a smartphone and a computer.
When do you think that changes though? How long? Like 10 years?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And like as like an entrepreneur, I think most entrepreneurs, like we don't have the luxury of raising like $50 or $100 million rounds where we can like wait for 10 years for things to happen.
Sure you do. Color raise that much.
Unless you're a famous entrepreneur. But like most of us have like a couple $1 million, and we have about 1.5 years to 2 years to like show traction. So we have to plan for the future and think about like what will happen in 10 years, but we have to build success like now.
So the other counter argument, and the big one,
yeah.
How did Instagram do what they did? Because they were mobile only. They had landing pages, same as you guys have for kind of driving growth that way. But it was mobile only, and it worked. And they're talking about growing up to past 100 million users now. Mobile.
Yeah, I mean it's phenomenal. Like I don't have a lot of great like arguments against Instagram, because I mean first of all, they were earlier than like today. Like they've still been around for a while. But I honestly think that Instagram like is an outlier in a lot of ways. Like I think they're a moral hazard to like entrepreneurs that want to go on mobile, because we're all going to try to like, and we launched like the original EverMe like a day after Instagram got acquired. So there was a lot of hype around like, oh, who's going to be the next Instagram? I just think that like the lesson to take from I don't know if there's a lot of lessons to take from that, because they're pretty much like, I think there are a couple ways to build a business, but I don't know 100% sure. Obviously, we're just trying things out. But like, there's Instagram and Facebook, which took off like lightning on like the first day. Like Instagram had 25,000 downloads their first day.
Right.
That's more than most like apps even get, like with the featuring and the press bump and all that kind of stuff. And Facebook also like took off right away. But like, I'm more interested as an entrepreneur because I think it's more predictable in creating success, maybe like the way Pinterest has. Like they launched on the web, and they're a great example too, because they came out, they launched when mobile was already like becoming dominant. And you would think that like there should be no social services that ever start on web again that are successful, right? Because everything should be mobile.
Right.
But they like, if you listen to like their founders talk, like they built that business like over the course of a while. Like they tested and iterated on different designs like 100 times, and they forced themselves into success.
Do you think it was more that, or more of who their actual target audience was?
Well, they were able to find their target audience. Like that took them a long time to find their target audience.
Sure.
It's possible maybe the Instagrams of the world, like there is a target audience of people that download apps that are window shoppers. Maybe that's like a target audience, and like they just happen to like sharing photos more than normal people. But I think that audience is hard to find.
I mean, I think that you could also make the argument with Instagram in particular that the way that app is constituted is purely built for mobile. I mean, you can't do that on a desktop. You wouldn't take your MacBook with you and go around and shoot pictures.
But Facebook is a photo sharing service too.
Yeah, that's true. It started as, it started exploding when you could tag pictures of your friends and whatnot. But and it's weird that it happened, right? Because it's sort of a clunky interface. You still have to upload a picture, and that's like very time consuming. But these things, I just feel like there are certain applications that come out that just make people need to use them no matter what the barriers to entry are. And so don't you want to focus on that more rather than worry about the analytics and kind of trying to find your way into the right stream of users?
I think there are certain types of entrepreneurs that do want to do that kind of thing. But I just think like being an entrepreneur is so risky, and being an investor is risky too, like in a lot of ways. Like you're betting, you're betting on like you're betting on like 1 out of 100 or I don't know, maybe in your case 5 out of 10 like succeeding. But for the entrepreneur, it's like you're in that like point. You have to make your company work out of 1,000 other companies. And so like every little choice that you make can have a big difference on your potential outcome. And mobile is set up to make you just kind of go for that. I just hope to get lucky. That's what I think, because I personally, I'm a computer scientist, so I'm not like, I see like, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs are like, they're more scientific, and I think that Instagram and apps like that are more of an art. Like the app itself is like there's no data to like kind of understand how they became successful. It's more like,
I think,
you know what I'm saying?
I think that's fair. I mean, I think that there's a lot that's taken from what you're talking about and making and closing viral loops with web stuff. You know, a lot of it was just sharing via Twitter, and everyone would look at those landing pages and say like, oh, I've got to do this. What's interesting is how many of those people who are looking at that they were able to convert. I don't know what the actual numbers are, but it has to be a huge amount with that many users, right? You know, people who are actually clicking on it. So if you click on it in the web, you know, Apple's already said now that most of the app downloads happen on the phones themselves rather than people going to iTunes. And
nobody downloads from iTunes.
Right, and that's gonna be eventually that'll be like eliminated completely, right? I mean, everything you'll do will be on mobile, and so you'll click on these things. And I think that's like another argument in terms of how it can still work on the with native apps themselves when everything is just kind of brought into this flow.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I to be honest, like I kind of regret saying anything about Instagram, because I don't know everything that happened there. Like I'm not privy to all the data that they had.
Sure.
You know, honestly, like the thing that's most interesting to me about Instagram is the fact that they sold to Facebook, because clearly like these guys are smart. Like they can see like their growth like this. Right. And I think they were like one of like maybe like 2 companies that had a chance to become.
So you think it was a mistake for them to sell?
Well, I don't know. I don't have their data, but they obviously saw something that made them think that like $1 billion was greater than their greatest opportunity on mobile, which I think is interesting. Because I wonder. Here's what I wonder. Right. Where's the revenue going to come from in the near future? Like, how much money do they have to raise to carry them to the point where they're going to make revenue? Right.
And that's kind of hitting on the second point of your piece, where it's like you could put an ad-supported model there, but you need to be at such a scale. Yes. That it makes sense. And if they could get to 1 billion users potentially, you could argue that they were certainly at that scale. But then it becomes a question of how well monetizable is mobile with ads, as you were talking about kind of with Google earlier. But yeah, I think those are all fair points. I still just think you got to look forward and look at how many billions of people are going to be using these things. And the only concern I have for the points you made, and I think that they're for the most part all very good points. I think that it's just, I worry that entrepreneurs start to go into this mindset of almost going back in time, where everyone knows that everyone uses mobile device all the time. It's something I use, either an iPad or an iPhone, way more than I use my computer. And I'm one of the savvy users that you were talking about who should be using their computer and should be able to get into the kind of the stream that you were talking about. And I just see that's so quickly changing, and we've already talked about how it's changing from the low end, and it's changing, and with me from the high end. And so I worry that you guys going back in time almost and thinking about it of the past like 10 years is just going to be problematic.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I worry about that too, and it keeps me up at night. But I think that I think what you're saying is interesting. Like, I do think it's dangerous. I think it's dangerous for someone to take the message out of my post as being like, go just build a website and forget about mobile. That would be ridiculous. Like, anybody that has the website and the mobile is obviously going to defeat them.
Yeah.
So like you definitely have to build both. Like there's no question. Like our team is actually overloaded by mobile developers because it's a lot harder. It takes a lot more like man hours to make a mobile app.
Sure.
So like, but the question is, if you're like an entrepreneur and you're thinking about some idea that you have, like say you're Mark Zuckerberg in 2003, and you have this idea to like compare Harvard students and how good they look, you can seize the opportunity. You should seize the opportunity and put out something out there and like fend for yourself and see how that idea kind of plays on the web and iterate and iterate. And once you've like understood like here's a product that works, here's a target market that works, like I think the mobile will come a lot easier that way.
And that's an interesting point, and I'm going to agree with you here because I actually just wrote something along those same lines this morning, which is that you know, I think of now when I look at my mobile usage of certain apps in particular, and the two examples I brought up were Facebook and Tumblr. So those obviously started as web properties, both of them. And with Facebook in particular, they kind of dropped the ball on mobile. They've admitted that, you know, it wasn't a very good experience, but their usage numbers were still, you know, going through the roof because they're Facebook.
Yeah.
But now that they have a pretty good, I think a pretty good mobile experience, and Tumblr has a really good mobile experience, I find myself wanting to use them on mobile first. And so I think you do have a window to do something interesting if you can prove what actions users want to do with your application, and then kind of tailor a mobile app around that, and that almost becomes like rocket fuel for people who want to use that.
Yeah, I thought that was a great point. I totally agree. If you're a big company, like you should be focusing all your energy on like figuring out mobile and like creating like native experiences that kind of capture like that simple successful action that users can do. I think that's the upside of mobile to me, actually, in some sense. Like, if you're a really innovative person, you know, like mobile is a great place for you to kind of demonstrate like your talent and you know, like figure out like new interaction patterns, like Lauren at Twitter, like the pull to refresh, like that kind of stuff is the stuff that's like gonna save big companies. But I do think that's I don't think that's necessarily like as an entrepreneur myself. Like I don't think that's what I want to do. I don't want to build demos. I want to be the platform that other people build demos for. And I think that kind of way of thinking is like more valuable, even if you wanted to have a small kind of like acquisition. That's what I'm really talking about. Like mobile companies are much more likely to be like acqui-hired, I think, than like a web company, because like their talent is so much more in demand by big companies.
That's interesting. Well, that's what we'll end on, Vibhu. So thanks for taking the time. That was really interesting.
Thanks, MG.